who made it.
What building concepts are needed to meet the ecological and economic framework condition? We might add also the social. And the idea is we are kicking off with a few initial thoughts and make this as interactive as possible. And I would also like to call upon a certain time Lars and Sebastian whether they have comments on this. Now we start with he's just disappeared. Okay, so you're disqualified. No, Robert, we cannot start without you. Yeah, he's from the Austrian Institute of Construction Engineering. I guess it sounds like a very blue-blooded organization, which everybody would know in this town. Now, I would like to ask you, are the current regulation, the building codes, etc., are they actually in line? I guess probably not, with these new innovative approaches, and what needs to happen to get them there? And it's probably a difficult step. So, Robert, what are your views on this? The idea was just to stick to 5 minutes, and then we continue the conversation among ourselves. Please.
Okay, thank you for the invitation. First of all, I have to say I'm not working at the OEB, Austrian Construction Institute. I'm the chairman for the guideline number 7 for this group, and I'm working for the steering government. So we started a few years ago with thinking about what we have to do with our buildings. We have to look further, we have to look at the future. And so we started 2 years ago with brainstorming with the other districts in Austria, what we can do in the laws, in the regulation, and we have finished already in May this year the basic document for the development of an OEB Guideline 7, sustainable of natural use, and represents an essential basis for the future, what we have to do in the buildings. It's a challenge for us to climate change. Was the EPBD was a challenge as fit for green buildings, circular economy, and all these parts were very important for us. And so we were sitting together and working. We had a few workshops, talking also with Sweden, what they are doing. We had a conference with Denmark, looking what they have done, and then we brought a paper together, and it was very necessary to think not only on materials, to think a little bit further. And the further thinking wasn't about these things, about the structure, how must we design it, how we demolish at the buildings again, what's happened after 50 years or 70 years, 75 years about this, how we use the natural resources this way. And we had always about to think about how we use it, reuse it. You ever think you hear these problems, reuse needed products, and so secondary materials, how we can use them, where we find them. And also, the first thing is also what we are doing with the buildings. They are still here already. Do we only build new buildings? This thing is not the right way. We have to think about this, what we are doing with the still existing buildings. Can we use them? Go on? More planes on it, floors on it? And then, after this, we can start with new buildings. So the buildings codes, basis paper for us, we started, I have to write it down, and maybe somebody of you knows it already. You see, that's the paper, the baseline for the essential requirements for the buildings, and the headlines in this paper would be introducing basic European guidelines and regulations, to write down what's happened while we are doing this, why it's necessary. It's a part one. Then the second first chapter about thinking the global warming potential in the life cycle of building, 75 years. It's about this year or 50 years we are thinking about this. I can remember when I was in the EU in the Commission, I have 3 months, we were glad to work there, and they discussed about construction building, and they said, how long will the lifetime of a building? One said 50 years, the other said 100 years. I know who was there in the discussion, 100 years. And then the English stand up and say, we need 67 years. Why? 67? Because we have to pay back 6 to 7 years for the new houses. So we spend the time to 75 years. Then the next part, and that is very close also, urban mining in the thinking, documentation of materials and resources we need in the building. What is the common future on the other side? What we are doing with the construction waste and demolition materials on the site and bringing to the side of the buildings. The service life, but also durability of a building, and the other side is of we can reuse the building in another way. You know, an office building is 30 years, 20 years maybe, and then what we are doing this. How can we use larger buildings, floors, in a different using? Maybe it's a shopping area, and afterwards we make a hotel in this way. That was our great access, what we wanted to do, and that's the basic now for the guidelines what's coming up in the next years. The guideline is the milestone for us that 2027 you have in Austria the guidelines, and then the Austrian district can bring it up in their laws.
Thank you. I will ask you afterwards, or I will ask Sebastian Nödel afterwards, whether your building code, which comes in 2027, will be compatible with his architecture, but we don't need, and then by that time maybe the Swedes come to you and they check what you are doing. Yeah, we're learning from each other. Thanks. There is clear, you know, the things are moving, the concepts are there, and of course the devil is very often in the detail. Philip, oh no, he's over there. Philip, if I come to you, you know, we need all these materials. I think Sebastian has described it, Lars has also described it. You know, how do you see the challenges or also the opportunities that this material actually materialize, that they're available, where we have the global, how global will this value chains be, and how secure? Now, we're getting now deep into the politics, but you worked for 20 or 30 years on supply chains or materials, so what is your take?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, maybe to start by saying what is not, I think, the main challenge, and that's the, it's not really technical, the challenge, I think, and that goes maybe for the whole energy and material transition. I think it's more about financial aspects and also indirect effects. For instance, when it comes to decarbonizing basic materials like steel, cement, and so on, quite much of it relates to one of the main mitigation measures, electrification. As Lars mentioned, we have those steel projects in Sweden, H2 Green Steel and hybrid. And so that's basically hydrogen-based steel. And that requires a lot of electricity. And then there is the challenge to get that electricity in place. And also, as Lars mentioned, that because of the very nice cost reductions seen in particular wind and solar power over the last decades, those would be the preferred technologies to invest in. But then one need flexibility measures on the demand side, and that's actually what we are looking part of what we're looking in our research also. How can one efficiently integrate flexible electricity in the system? Because if you have an electricity system and you just increase the non-dispatchable electricity share, the value of that produced electricity will go down, and it will have a self-cannibalization effect on it. So that I think is a challenge. But also for that electricity generation, we see more other challenges, in particular social acceptance, which is I think Swedish people are too. We have a lot of land, so we should have good conditions for that, but we are rather spoiled. And there are people, if you do these polls of the general public, they put renewables at the highest. They want that, but they want it somewhere else, and everyone wonder what this somewhere else is to be. So that's a challenge. What on the positive side, which maybe that was not your question, but I think I say something positive things in any case.
No, please feel free to come up with an upbeat message.
We researchers tend to focus on the challenges all the time. But I think a positive thing is that many companies, Lars mentioned this fossil-free initiative, fossil-free initiative, and many companies at the end of the value chain, where this cost is, so to say, low if you do these high transformative measures, they have put up targets on when they are going to be climate neutral, say year 2040, and about including the whole value chain, so scope 1, 2 and 3, meaning that they need to purchase climate neutral material. Of course, they can not do it next year, but they have these plans. And I think this momentum created by these the companies far out in the value chain is particular at the moment. You see it mostly in the automotive industry, where, for instance, Volvo Cars have a target, and Lars mentioned the Polestar company, but Volvo Cars have a target of climate neutrality, scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions by year 2040, and then of course they need this carbon-free steel. So I think that's a very positive thing. But then on the negative side, of course, we have long lead times to get all these things in place, and the financial risk associated with those who invest in various things, and also the part of the electricity system which is not deregulated, that is the TSO, the transmission system operators, that need to build more cables, and that's also hurdles. Finally, I could just mention that, of course, circularity is very important, and when it comes to plastics, we have those projects also to do real circularity, and I think society needs to more ask, we must ask, how do we handle the carbon atoms in the system, and that is something that we can maybe discuss later. But yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. A lot of these companies having net zero targets, as you said, they need to buy materials. So Robert, you need to hurry up, to get your supply side right. Then, there will be demand, and for this we need standards in order to get this going.
We are fast enough, but because we are thinking, use the old buildings and don't take in new buildings. I think that's important. How to handle with this? We have so many buildings with the flats are free. And there is already the carbon global warming is in here. We don't use it anymore. We use it and build new buildings up there, up floors. I think this is the first way, because in this way we can handle it very fast, the problem. And we have to think always. Now, sustainable is 3 parts, I think so. Economics, ecological, and social. We can't leave the people behind us. Need to live with us. And I give you right. You have started 27 or 2015, sorry. But we had to start at 1897 already. Nobody knows the Brundtland report, nobody knows it. We started, we had to think about present, and we have for the future generation that they have the same standard. So we are 36 years too late what we are doing now. not only this.
Okay, now this, probably cannot rectify, but thank you for reminding us. It's also interesting, I live in a house from 1910. It's probably carbon, negative because it's all already discounted. I get no benefit for this. And, there is an incentive to build a new one.
Yeah.
Now, we go to Ida. She is the construction build, or the building specialist in Carbon X, or the guru, so whenever we have a question, we call her, and most of the time she has an answer. I was struck by Sebastian, his contribution. There is a mixture of high-tech and low-tech. I hope I get it right. And the second point we are raising is, how do you do the carbon management? I never heard that anybody in the housing or the construction sector does the carbon management. Yes, the materials production, yes, because there's regulation. But how is there approaches to do a carbon management in the building in Sweden? And again, high-tech, low-tech, can this brought together, and what's the value there? Lots of questions, and you get 5 minutes,
I'll see what I can answer. I think, based on, I want to just start with the starting point, because what we found in Sweden is that we started, like your system in Austria, I think, is quite low carbon, the energy system. And we had the same experience in Sweden after the oil crisis in the 70s, where our heating system was completely based on individual oil heaters in the houses. We started already then to really transform and transition our heating system towards district heating systems based mainly on bio-based wastes, as well as heat pumps. At the same time, we also put really strict regulations on energy efficiency in the buildings. What happens then was that, of course, the emissions that stem from the heating of the buildings went down quite a lot. At the same time, though, the emissions that stemmed from the materials used in the buildings went up. So we saw that shift, and that's really where we started off in this program, is realizing that, okay, we need to actually dig in deep to actually change that shift. We can't just continue. It's really good that we build really, really energy efficient, but we also have to think about all the materials that goes in, the transport of those materials, the process of the construction in itself, and all the emissions that stem from there. So that's where really the starting point is, and now we have regulations in Sweden that you have to do a climate calculation on all new buildings above 100 square meters. To really show what actually goes into the buildings, to really increase that awareness. And where my research has started is really looking then at the entire supply chain, from all the base materials all the way into you have a final building. And we can see that, just like Philip said, that right now in terms of, like, if you talk low tech, we can see in the research that we can reduce emissions by 50% with already available technologies, products and practices. So we showed that quite early, and now we've proven it. We can see that there are several buildings in Sweden where they've actually demonstrated this is possible, and also to no increased cost on a project level. And why is that? Well, they really look at the resource efficiency measures and circularity. But I would say so far, the circularity is coming now, but so it's been a lot about optimizations. Structural optimizations of the buildings, using the right materials in the right place, and really trying to see what materials do we actually need and what are just surplus materials. So I think that's one thing, and really what it comes down to is looking at carbon already early in the design of a project. And then follow it through all the way along the project stages to ensure that you actually follow up and that you deliver on what you promised. And that's where really the carbon management comes in, and we see that it's what Lars was talking about, bridging agents. You need to have someone accountable for the carbon management along project stages and also across the supply chain that is responsible for having these collaborations or cooperation, because in order to deliver on that, you need to have collaborations all along the supply chain to see what all different material producers, the transport, logistics, companies, what can they deliver? How can we support each other in that? So I would say someone with accountability, a carbon manager, a bridge agent that has this responsibility, that also has the incentives to deliver on it, is important.
Okay, thank you for this. We are getting into the carbon management. I mean, that's certainly a topic we might want to discuss further. Now we're coming to Gert. You know, you're running this innovative village in Dritten. Did you have a, sorry?
Running, it's not running now.
I mean,
it's
in development. In development, okay. You know, but you know, you're the figurehead. Now, do you have a carbon manager? Or how do you manage the carbon? Maybe you have a better idea. But also, if you could pick up some of the points that were mentioned here.
Yeah, thank you very much. I totally agree with. I think we will have to concentrate on the existing building stock in the future. This will be I think for my job, it will be a totally new or a shifting of our focus in the future. The village, as you said, is a urban development quarter in the 3rd district. There we are doing new buildings. This is still, so to say, maybe one of the last urban quarters that is newly built. But at least it is a brownfield development. We have had existing buildings there before, but they couldn't be reused, and parts of it were even a landfill. So I think it's also a quite sustainable way of developing urban quarters. There have been a lot of aspects that we tried to implement in our development. All in all, we tried to be as sustainable as possible given the framework conditions we are facing. So, of course, it's an economical. We are limited through economic conditions, but also legal conditions, and yeah, this is what we are facing these challenges. But I think an urban development is in my opinion, the most sustainable way of developing, because I can implement a lot of different aspects, sustainable aspects, in social as well as in ecological sense, and these are which I often cannot implement in one single building block. So we are trying to balance over a lot of different building blocks. The village is 250,000 square meters of gross floor area, so it's quite a large development. We are having 22 building blocks, and for example, there's a park with 2 hectares in the center of it, which wouldn't be possible if the area wasn't here. So of course we also tried to get a high quality free space or space for green spaces, but we are also trying to do some new. At the time we were developing it was new. We were building we are building an energy network. So we are having a large geothermal energy network in the area. So there are 500. I don't know the English word, Erdsonden, that are connected together, that are covering all 22 plots, and there we are trying to produce as much of local renewable energy as possible. Unfortunately, we are not totally autark, but we are nearly there.
How much is it roughly?
Up to 75 to 80% of the heating energy, and in summers the cooling energy is produced locally.
He has a solution.
Yeah, I know there's another project in Aspen, and I think it's the Robin, as far as I know. I think it is based on this technology.
We cooperate with Robin.
We are, and just one sentence. We are also trying to implement a lot of photovoltaics, and given if the legal conditions are clear, we are implementing an EEG, renewable energy community, so that we can use the energy across all of the plots in the area. But this is just some highlights, so to say. There are we are trying to implement a lot of other aspects in the quarter.
Thank you. I mean, you brought up the energy part, which, I mean, obviously the panel is about materials, but the energy part, first of all, the operational energy is also important. I guess it's also what the ministry has been concentrating a lot in the past. Maybe we also picked that up further in the discussions. How do you create these energy hubs which create more autonomy? While on the other hand, you need to be careful if you pick the good spots. Somebody is happened to live at the bad spot. Somehow this has also to be covered. We see this now with the energy communities. There's many in Europe, and many of them don't take new customers because they have optimized it for themselves, and you cannot go further. Now we go to Henriette Spürer from the ministry. I mean, you have heard this before. Sorry? Okay. I worked 30 years on climate change, so there's only one ministry. Now, we are, you have heard of many of these points. So how are you trying to push this further, or supporting all these initiatives there are? So please, your final, or your comments, your wise words.
My final words. Right. I hope not. Well, thanks very much for inviting me to this discussion. It's a real pleasure also to sit with Swedish colleagues, because we admire you for a lot of things, for climate law, I shall say, but also for the supply chain perspective, which was presented earlier, and also what I really like, and we try to copy some, is the road mapping exercises you guys have been doing, and we have always tried to translate some of it into Austria, and I'd always try when I go to Sweden, and I try and find the gist of why it works, and I found it's a culture of trust, because the ministries in Sweden are very small. It's only 20 people sometimes in something like energy, where you've got huge agencies, and they just give objectives, and then that's it, right? While we sit and haggle over 200 pages of documents for a long time. Anyways, I really like that. And I wanna maybe not take the supply chain perspective, but use the long name of this ministry in answering your question: climate action, environment, energy, mobility, innovation, and technology. With me myself working in innovation and technology, but it's important to look at this topic from all sorts of perspectives. So obviously a ministry is working with legal frameworks, with standards, with funding, all these strategies, etc. But maybe let me pick out one or two examples from each of the areas. Maybe I start with mobility, because this has not yet been mentioned, but I think it's a very important aspect, not only in the electrification of construction machinery. Good companies in Austria are already doing this, but also in where to put buildings, how many parking spaces to put there. This is where these guys come in at a regional and also a local level. And I've been haggling with you guys 10 years ago when the electric cars were very early, and we were trying to get the building codes maybe changed And this is a very good example because new technology coming and the code's kind of saying, well, we're not sure, will it come or not, and how do you deal with it? It's very complicated work you guys are doing. And also, of course, kind of mobility contracts you can do, supplying sustainable mobility options in cities. That's two examples from the mobility perspective. Then in the environment we have circular economy. This is obviously where construction codes and all sorts of regulations for materials, etc., come in. And I think we really recognize in our circular economy strategy in Austria, which has quite a few quantitative targets, which I'm always keen on, because when you have quantitative targets, you can start calculating what is actually needed. We know that the building and construction sector really accounts for half of the footprint, right? So we really do need to get a lot better in the kinds of materials we use across the whole life cycle. I think that's another very important perspective, from the planning to the building to the use and then eventually to the recycling, be it after 67 years or 100 years, or I think I myself am living in a century from the 17th century, so even that exists. That's the circular economy bit. Then obviously the energy perspective. You already mentioned EPBD as a kind of European regulation. You probably followed the very intense debate on the Renewable Heat Act. There's the Renewable Heat Act, just as a side comment, is also one of the milestones Austria committed to fulfilling as part of the Recover and Resilient funds we get from the European Union. So if we wouldn't have been able to finish some kind of Renewable Heat Act, we would have missed out on millions from the European Union, from the Commission. It's very interesting sometimes how civil servants also try and mix financial incentives with regulation. Same goes for the climate check of laws, actually. The Renewable Heat Act, as you learned this week, the government decided not to implement a phase out of fossil fuels in all the existing buildings in 2040, but instead the new budget concludes 1 billion euros to exchange old heating systems. We increase the funding rate up to 75% funding for exchanging heat systems. Plus, I really want to take Robert's comment on the social. We also increase the budget for poorer households, also wanting to exchange heating systems, and then it goes up to 100%, all the costs being covered. Just a couple of examples from the energy. And then, of course, innovation and technology. That's my main business. And maybe I get to this in the next point, because I'm already seeing. I always manage to speak 5 minutes, even though I tell you it was only 1.
Thank you. Perfect. We come to the innovation. I mean, Ida, you're working on these innovative points, and Sebastian has brought some. But Sebastian, could I ask you, is the building codes allowing or supporting your innovative buildings?
I do not know. Oh, okay.
You don't know?
Just pick up the phone.
Okay.
No, I think it will allow it, of course. Sure.
Okay. Okay. Otherwise,
it's allowed. You can build it. You must, or you have to live inside. So it's no problem.
It's no problem.
Build it
Yeah.
without heating, without shadows.
Well, this is a problem in Germany.
In Austria, it's not allowed to have cooling machines in residential buildings. So you have to build it without cooling systems, because to save energy.
okay, so your market will be, Austria.
You think there's no other problem? It's a low building far away from everything. So for the infrastructure, where the people are living. So we have to look close together. Planning is the future in the village, in the center of the village, not outside.
Either. Now, you need to integrate the mobility, the materials, the energy hub, and then you need to bring this all in innovative approaches. The architects play a role that seems, like quite complicated. You know, how is your experiences from Sweden? How do you bring that together, if at all? I mean, maybe too steep of an order.
Yeah. I think it's. I will say that it has not been a shift where we all move in the same direction at the same speed. Definitely not. There are forerunners, and there are really ambitious, like, pilot projects where everyone walks at the same pace. But there are a lot of instances where we're not really walking at the same pace. And I would say that the architects are really only in the last few years getting into the conversation. I think they've been wanting to be part of the conversations, but maybe haven't really been allowed to be involved in the conversations of actually how much we can contribute as architects. And now we're getting into that dialogue. And it's really about then, because I wanted to ask Sebastian just in the whole life carbon aspect, because you were talking about really thick walls and a lot of concrete. And then I think, okay, how is the balancing of, and I think that those are aspects. And then I think, on the other hand, though, all the upsides that you're demonstrating. So those are some interesting. I just wanted to see what your reflection is.
I would love to give you an answer on this, yeah. So, well, the project in Lustenau in Vorarlberg, the first project, has these really massive walls. It doesn't need to be bricks, it doesn't need to be concrete. We do have wooden, just wood projects in Switzerland by now. So, of course, wood is a philosophical question if it is really carbon neutral or not. We can discuss this like 5 hours.
Yeah.
But
longer.
Well, longer. But it is possible to build our energy, build it with our energy concept, just with wood. It is possible, of course.
So, climate neutrality, technology neutrality.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
one of the
and
keys.
I think that's the other, because there's a lot you can do with concrete. And there's a lot you can do with bricks, and also reuse of bricks. We see that quite a lot coming in terms of circularity. Reuse of bricks was one of the first ones, really. And now we see reuse of entire concrete elements, so concrete floorings. But also in terms of new concrete, of course, we see potential for at least more than 50% reduction in the emissions associated with concrete, from substituting some of the cement for different type of waste-based materials, to reducing the cement content overall in terms of where are you using the concrete and how much strength do you need there, or how much is the concrete exposed, like on the outer walls compared to the inner walls. You can use different type of concretes. So those are the things that we're seeing now. And then, of course, as I said before, optimizing, slimming. But then you have the benefits of the concrete and the bricks in terms of the mass and keeping the heating inside it, or the cooling. So.
Thank you. Materials, Philip. You know,
just a comment there. I think that, there are obviously many technology options, and that are actually quite well known and so on. I think one challenge in Sweden, and I guess in many countries, is the scale up. We have lots of these sort of flagship projects. One building contains everything: smart home, electronics, and nice building construction. But the problem has been the scaling up to get it on a broad rollout. So I think that's one thing, and also that it's what was mentioned. Also, of course, it's not the building itself. Also, it's the context and where it is located, how it relates to mobility, and all these kind of aspects of sustainable city planning. We see nice buildings, but maybe they're built far because the price of land was low, was built far away, and people have to commute by car and so on. So that's one aspect. Also, when it comes to projects, I think there's a lot. And that relates to the first point I brought up, that it's very much up to the individual project leader if that person has an interest or not. And even more so also in construction industry of roads and motorways and so on. So that's something that should be more focused on to get it more wide rollout. I would say that's. Then when it comes to building code, we've seen some.
Philip, can I interrupt you here in 1 second? Is the construction industry, we have a lot of construction industry here, is it really actively joining that conversation? And it's also somewhat to Philip and to you. Is it actively involved and wants to get into this discussion? That's a question, I think, to all of you.
But yeah, absolutely. But I think some of these construction companies are very big, so they have these sort of sustainability people and so on. But it's to get it down through the whole organization. That's the challenge, because projects are individual; they are not the same. So compared to if you produce automobiles or something. So.
No, but I wouldn't underestimate. I mean, this is a whole industry that's really also pushed by all the legal frameworks we've seen before. So it's very good that we started with all the flagship projects. We did the same in Austria. We now have over 100 flagship projects. We really started at the building level, which also, mind you, produced a very active passive house industry, which then got very successful on the international stage. So this also has a kind of market aspect to it. But if you look at what we're doing in kind of innovation technology funding now, also we're really asking all the different stakeholders. We did a huge study with over 300 stakeholders, which showed us that in terms of using existing buildings from 2010 to 2021, over 300,000 new buildings were built in Austria. And 14% of them still use fossil fuels. So and then you have soil use, you have all the problems associated with this. So what we are trying to do now at a kind of research program level is align everything. Align everything with climate neutrality, align everything with circular economy. So you see the topic in different programs. You have the use of space data for the construction sector, actually quite interesting. You have the use of artificial intelligence for recycling in the construction sector. You have all our usual still buildings, materials, etc., but what we're trying to do in answering your point, Philip, which I think is very relevant, is trying to get up to the quarter level or even to the city level. So, for example, we have one program called, actually aligned to the European mission, 100 Climate Neutral Smart Cities, where you also link all this to the budgetary processes, to the government processes, and really say, look, we give you money for capacity building also at city stage, because you and me know that it's very nice to have innovative projects and games and goals and all of that, but there's not enough people usually. So we hand out money now for cities to actually employ people to get into it and then do research projects, etc., but on a bigger scale, more aligned to the policy processes and more aligned to the actual targets, that you do not get into what you described earlier. You become perfect by using geothermal, heat pumps, etc., but then not so perfect on the materials side. And I really value that we are getting into a more serious debate, because what we like to do in Austria is getting into big debates about, is it timber or is it concrete, or Sebastian, this is the kind of debate we have had for a long time, but I think it's not good to have this debate. It's really important to really move forward and find the right mix.
Austria is not the only country where you
have
this.
But we like to fight the heart.
Yeah, we have this debate, but I think at least for this room here we have solved it. Robert, you want to come in, or anybody of you want to comment on?
Maybe just one addition. I think that the whole building industry will have to adopt. So I think they are really interested in joining this discussion, even if they are not onto it now. So everybody, there are new regulations, there are EU taxonomy, the ESG regulations, so everybody has to see its own industry, its own part of business, and is evaluated by that. So I think this is a big part for all of the industry participants.
There is just, buildings industry. What is it? I only see materials, industry which contributes. What is this building industry? But, maybe Robert, then Philip.
Yeah.
I mean,
let's say we have the legislation framework, what you need. But we have big building industry, also in Austria, big players. Nobody say to them, you are not allowed to build carbon-free like this. Why we need a legislation for this? So if we are owner from a big, like the big companies, they can say, let's build carbon-free. They can still do it and say to buy it we have better buildings, we have no carbon incentive. Nobody is forbidden to do this. We always look in the other side here. You have to do this. No, go in the other side. Maybe you have big efforts then if you go in this. Taxonomy, circular, and all these things. Let's think this. Also is always thinking, it's not standing in the law, so I don't have to do it.
Do you
Do it
see
the
some
other
of
way.
this?
I think
You have to do it the other way too. To have
Do you see
project.
some of this in your change of attitude? I mean, not change of attitude that people say, let's do it, and then.
I think what we've seen in Sweden is a lot of local initiatives where the local municipality goes together with local building companies, local material producers, local consultancies and architects, and they develop sort of their own frameworks and roadmaps. Where do we want to be? And I think, we see that in Malmö, for example, which has been hugely successful, and it's really now a race to the top rather than a race to the bottom. I think the only challenge we see now, there's a lot of those local initiatives popping up now, and they have different requirements and different calculations, and so the companies spend a lot of time just calculating rather than actually doing the improvements. So we don't want that. But it's, it's a start, and now they're trying to harmonize in order to ensure. But I think that's really driving it. And it's because the companies themselves are in the working groups of these initiatives. They are in the driver's seat. It helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it's all about, there's a sort of scientific term called collective action. It's that, of course, it's actually formulated by, for instance, Elinor Ostrom. And I think what we see now with this, for instance, initiative, this fossil-free Sweden, is that different sectors has promised to fulfill the Swedish climate targets, and they go together and they sort of agree on things that they promise things to do. But also, of course, we have some requirements from the government, and actually many companies realize that they are in forerunners, and actually that they would benefit from stricter targets or rules or carbon prices. So I think that's so far so good, but of course it is a challenge to get this collective action really going. And I just two examples just that I've seen heard myself. One was about reusing of, that was like one of the companies that we cooperated with, they wanted to reuse 500 doors in an old building, they renovated, but the building code said that the doors had to be, I think I forgot now exactly, I don't know why the doors.
I think
800
they were lacking 2 centimeters.
Yeah, but there was no rational argument for that. So they were too narrow, the doors, so they couldn't reuse them. So that was one. Another example was actually when I go for lunch, we pass a building. They built in this sort of prestigious low carbon building where they had these wood beams. And so they were lifting for 3 days. They were lifting up these wood beams with 2 lifters with diesel engines running full speed the whole day. So I wonder that diesel produced, how much that offset the carbon saving with the wooden beams. So clearly we are in an initial phase where it hasn't sort of penetrated the whole value chain and so on. And I think this collective action, I think it's a good term pointing to how important it is to not only have these either individual flagship projects, as we mentioned before, or just part of an organization that pay attention, but we need all actors to work together. But I think we have come, at least part of the good part of the way.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Can I just introduce,
absolutely.
just as a reaction to collective action, and also what Ida said about the agent we need, huh?
Mm-hmm.
I like the agent, like a little magician. Maybe 2 examples from Austria. From the kind of innovation and technology realm. This is basically why we do not anymore start a program on decarbonizing steel industry, for example, or construction industry, or renovation, or things like that, without also having something called an innovation laboratory, which is basically a kind of a structure where all these projects are accompanied. and also in the case of renovation, for example, a kind of service for smaller companies or for interested citizens where, you know, basic questions can be answered, so that hopefully, I know we're not there yet, I'm just telling you what we try and do, so that hopefully in the end you get away from all these different calculations. So when we do the city programs, we have big platforms where the cities, the bigger cities, but also the smaller cities come and exchange, so that not everyone has to do the same work. And the last example, for example, for the renewable energy communities we have, which is basically, by the way, an example where everyone was like, oh my goodness, you know, what are they trying out now? And actually they're running great. A great example of citizens' collective action. We also implemented a small kind of service team at our Climate Energy Fund where people also can go to and ask questions. So try and basically not only dish out money or put down laws, but also being very, very active in building an innovation system, building and fostering the platforms needed to actually have this go in one direction at some point.
Thank you. I'm looking to the time, and if we go on, then our boss in the back will give me a strong look. Unfortunately, we have to conclude here. I think your sort of examples in a way was quite nicely summarizing some of the points where we go forward. The next step is you contributing to the ideas. We warmed you up, so now we try to develop all these ideas. But let me just maybe pick up a few points which I did. There is some barriers, electrification, and electricity, that's everywhere. I mean, there is no climate meeting without this being the biggest barrier. We know this acceptability, no need to go deeper into this. Of course, people are an issue. I guess you're also struggling with it. There is maybe not enough people there. Scale, we always forget. The pilots are great, but to roll that out is a very different story. We learned, or I learned, I should say, the building codes are not the issue. Robert has solved them, and it's Austria.
No, I'm not solving them. The whole district working together to find a solution for this problem, and other problems are coming in. It is not only one way to solve the problem, we have to do it in different ways to find the solution. And for my last work, from my side, my students are always asking them in the first lesson, what do you think, which material is the best for building houses? The one say bricks, the other say wood. And then I always ask, what would be the best material up in the North Pole? Then keep thinking ice. So it is not only one special material you need, it belongs to for the using and where in which area you are building. And this is also we have to take into account. And not only one way, it's different ways to solve.
And if I can add on what we have discussed here, of course, is the difference between existing and new building, and we are not always clear what we are talking. But what you're referring to was this technology neutrality, which I think in these building discussions is a fairly new thing. Most of the building discussions sort of go down in descending in an acronym about which is the best, like your students. We didn't really discuss ISO far, but that should be a new one. And you mentioned AI and machine learning. I think what we have learned from Carbon Exit, there's an incredible potential on the data side once you use this, and also companies like Nordvolt with the batteries, they use incredibly amount of AI and machine learning. Now, let me...
Can I do some advertisement? Sorry.
Sure, sure.
So, because I didn't manage to mention our building technology report. In case you haven't seen it, you got to show
Put it up. The photographer is coming. You showed up your ones.
In case you haven't seen it, because this is really the result of asking over 300 stakeholders what technologies we should work on in the future. And what I really like about it, it's not only about technology and the technological potential, but also about the impact this could possibly have on climate neutrality. And I think that's the kind of mix we need to get to.
Thank you. So if any of you has a roadmap in the pocket or some other ideas, you know, go to the photographer, hold it up, and we put it up. Hey, yeah, the cement people. You know, where is the wood people? No, okay. No, unfortunately we need to stop. But before I thank all the speakers for fascinating discussions. Actually, you discussed among each other. This is the best which can happen.